Excuse me, what are you doing here? The welfare office is 3 blocks down. Brad Mitchell's voice cut through the cool air of First National Bank's marble lobby like a knife. He looked up from behind the teller counter, his well-practiced smirk sliding right past the tailored suit worn by the black woman who had just approached. Keisha Thompson paused for half a beat, not out of fear, but from the weary recognition of an old wound. Above them, the digital clock over the teller row read 12:30 p.m. Near the entrance, a polished brass plaque announced Executive Committee Meeting, 1:15 p.m. Another internal notice read, Branch closed for lunch, 1:02 p.m. The ticking minutes dropped into the marble-lined space like an invisible metronome. Brad made sure his voice carried across the lobby. This is a private bank, not a check-cashing spot. People like you are always bringing fake checks or trying something. He jerked his chin toward the door, as if shooing away a stray dog. ATM's outside if you've got an EBT card. Camera phones clicked. A well-dressed white woman whispered, "We should call security." In the corner, an elderly black man shook his head, the fatigue of someone who'd seen this scene too many times. Maya Adams, a freelance journalist, stood right behind Keisha. Tilting her phone just enough to be discreet, she went live on Instagram. Banking discrimination happening now. First National downtown. Viewer count jumped from dozens to hundreds. The comments filled with banking while black. Keisha set a withdrawal slip on the stone counter, her voice even. "I'd like to withdraw $25,000 from my account." Brad burst out laughing. "25 grand? That's more than most folks make in a year. What game are you playing?" He snatched the slip and crumpled it lightly, as if it were trash. "Let me guess. You're going to say you own a business, or you're some kind of director, right? Everyone says that." Susan Clark, the branch supervisor, emerged from her glass-walled office. Her heels clicked a steady beat, eyes sweeping the room before locking on Keisha as if she were a problem. "What's going on, Brad?" she asked in the tone of a formality, her body already angled toward her employee. "This person's trying to withdraw a suspicious amount. Says she has an account here." Susan's brow rose. "Unusual, indeed. Ma'am, ID please. For large sums, we require proof of employment." Keisha produced her driver's license and a platinum First National card with her name embossed. Brad glanced at them and sneered. "Fake IDs are pretty good these days. Cards, too. They make them look real." He held the card up like evidence. His words didn't just deny the documents. They denied Keisha's right to exist in this space. Jerome Brooks, a 10-year security veteran, appeared from the back. His posture showed he knew what was unfolding, but the uniform pinned him into the role of enforcer. Susan spoke loudly enough for the room. "Jerome, we may need you. Possible fraud attempt." The lobby began to split, some nodding along with security caution, others frowning at the stench of bias. Keisha's phone buzzed. Federal Reserve conference call, 2:00 p.m. She silenced it, a small motion noticed by many eyes. Maya's live stream frame tightened until viewers could hear breathing. Numbers climbed. 847. 1200. 2000. Comments flew. "Disgusting! Call the press! Which branch is this?" Susan edged closer to the counter, voice cold. "We have strict protocols for large withdrawals, especially for certain types of accounts." The phrase hung like toxic fog. Certain types clearly meant more than account categories. Maya's lens caught the complicit glance between Susan and Brad, their stance forming a wall against the customer. "Please wait in the seating area near security while we verify. Could take a few hours," Susan said, dressed in polite language, but steeped in humiliation. pushing Keisha out of line like a suspect so real customers could proceed. Brad's keys clattered on the keyboard. System flagged anomalies. Red flags need review. It was a lie, but unchallenged, it could become an administrative truth. At the next counter, a white man withdrew $20,000. Swipe, sign, done. No questions about income, source, or intent. The PA system crackled. Executive meeting in 45 minutes. The air grew heavier. Susan checked her watch but held her ground. Maya scanned comments. Civil rights lawyers and finance insiders were joining in. The live stream blew up when new customers walked in, phones raised. The lobby became a public courtroom. Keisha's words landed slow and deliberate. I have banked here for 6 years. The account number is on the card and ID. I want to withdraw my money. In this linguistic trap, anger would be labeled aggressive. Calmness would be read as dangerously confident. She chose controlled silence, letting the cameras speak. A businessman muttered, "If she's got ID, give her the money." A middle-aged woman countered, "Gotta be careful these days, people take advantage." Neither was neutral. Each fed oxygen to the fire of prejudice. Executive meeting in 30 minutes. Viewers, 3,400, 5,200. Maya's camera caught Jerome glancing down, ashamed for the system he served. That moment was the human fracture inside the cold machine. Keisha stood tall, leather portfolio closed before her. Inside lay board meeting documents, contracts, items that could reshape part of the banking industry. But to Brad, she was just the wrong color in the wrong place. And wrongs like that, in his habit, needed procedures to fix. When Maya zoomed in on Keisha's steely expression, viewers began betting in the comments. She's holding an ace. Look at her breathing. This won't end at the teller counter. The bank lobby fell into an eerie hush, as if the whole room held its breath. The executive elevator's shadow slid across the frosted glass. A rivet in the tension was about to pop, and in the center of the storm, Keisha laid her hand on the portfolio, still closed, like a commander touching the switch to change the field. The executive elevator doors slid open. David Parker, the regional manager, strode out quickly. Dark suit, perfectly straight tie. What's going on here? His eyes swept the scene. A black woman at the counter, a crowd, dozens of phones recording. In his mind, alarm bells were already ringing. Susan leaned in, speaking low enough to exclude Keisha from the exchange. Suspected fraud. Trying to withdraw $25K, suspicious documents. Brad flagged red alerts in the system. David nodded like someone who'd handled this 100 times. He turned, projecting a polished public relations tone. "Ma'am, I'm David Parker, regional manager. It appears there's been some confusion regarding our verification procedures." Keisha was calm. "There's no confusion. I'm withdrawing my own money." David abruptly raised his voice, addressing the whole lobby rather than her. "Sophisticated schemes are on the rise. Identity theft, falsified documents, social engineering. We must be extremely cautious." Jerome stepped forward half a pace, speaking quietly. "Perhaps we can move to a private room to discuss this. Avoid the commotion?" David shook his head, deliberately loud enough for the phone mics to catch. "No. Fraud investigations must be transparent. Other customers need to see we take this seriously." And just like that, the main stage was set in the middle of the lobby. Part deterrent, part message. People like you should know your place. Maya glanced at the stream of comments. Public discrimination. Call NAACP. Tag FDIC OCC Fed. Viewers spiked from 7,800 to 10,000. Online pressure now tugged against the on-site power play. But David kept control of the narrative. He placed a thick folder on the counter, the apparatus of the system itself. We require proof of employment, source of funds, a written statement of purpose for the withdrawal, possibly tax returns and your SSN, standard procedure. Each item was a drill bit into her privacy, a message. We don't believe you. Meanwhile, at the next counter, another customer completed a large transaction in 3 minutes. No questions about purpose, source, or employment. Brad chimed in. I'll run it through the fraud detection system, see if there are any suspicious patterns. In truth, it was a stalling tactic, but it sounded technical and official. The machine became a shield for people to hide behind. The PA crackled. Executive meeting in 20 minutes. Susan frowned. She needed to prepare, but stayed planted at the counter like a gatekeeper. Her voice steady. Policy applies equally to all customers. As soon as the words left her mouth, Maya panned to capture 2 white customers completing their transactions without delay. The image shredded the slogan. A group of young professionals walked in, immediately pulling out their phones. A black woman in her 30s asked bluntly, "Are you harassing this customer because she's black? This is 2025, not 1964. Susan replied curtly, "Please don't interfere with security procedures." The word procedures repeated like an ethical exemption spell. Keisha's phone buzzed repeatedly, her assistant reminding her of the 2 p.m. call with the Fed. Her lawyer texting, "I'm watching the live stream. Want me to come in?" Keisha didn't respond. She kept her breathing steady, her gaze fixed. Maya zoomed in. The woman was coiled steel, not trembling. "We'll need you to take a seat and wait," David said formally. "This process could take several hours." The choice before the target: endure humiliation to access a basic service or walk away from her own money. Jerome looked down, avoiding Keisha's eyes. He was caught between orders and conscience. Viewers, 12,400, then 15,000. Major news outlets' names began appearing in the comments. The live stream link was embedded on multiple news sites. Upstairs, the corporate headquarters flagged a social crisis alert. Legal began collecting footage. David took an internal call, his expression flickering, then resumed his role. He pulled out another stack of forms. "Please sign here, here, and here, granting us permission to contact your employer." Then came the leading question. "Where do you work?" In David's mind, the only acceptable answer was nowhere important. The idea that this woman might actually be wealthy had never crossed his mind. Keisha answered simply, "I'm self-employed." Brad smirked. "Self-employed? Yeah, consultant or startup, right? Can't prove the income." These jabs were just a polite mask over the same thing. They didn't want to release the money to someone like her. The PA again. "Executive meeting in 15 minutes. A ripple of urgency passed through the room. An older customer approached. Irritated. "I need to deposit before lunch." Brad waved him off. "Security situation." Then he turned to the crowd, pointing at Keisha. "She's trying to withdraw a large amount with questionable paperwork." The woman hesitated, eyeing Keisha with suspicion she'd just been handed. "Show me the policy that requires this level of verification." The young black woman spoke up again. "I've withdrawn more without anyone asking." Susan gripped her bag straps. "Policy applies equally." But the contrast was now undeniable. Over there, smooth and fast, here, paperwork gauntlet. Maya, seeing her battery drop, hooked up a power bank. She watched the audience surge, comments flying, "This is a live case study. Tag your lawmakers. Get their faces on camera." It was no longer one woman's story, it was social evidence. The PA. Executive meeting in 10 minutes. The announcement sounded like a starter pistol for the next phase. The lens swung back to Keisha. She placed both hands on the leather portfolio. The crowd leaned forward unconsciously. Maya zoomed in on her eyes. No longer the gaze of someone pleading for service. It was the gaze of someone about to decide the outcome. Trying to pressure us with a live stream. Brad tried to salvage control, his voice losing some of its arrogance. Video evidence can be misinterpreted. Keisha said nothing. A breath passed. Then click, the portfolio opened. Inside, the edge of a thick stack of papers, a metal business card case, and 2 pristine cards with silver edges catching the chandelier light. Maya held her breath. Viewers jumped from 18,000 to 22,000. Jerome lifted his chin slightly, like a soldier hearing a new commander's order. Keisha reached into the case and drew a single business card. The bank lobby, once filled with the noise of procedures and excuses, went silent. No one knew exactly what was about to happen, only that the balance of power was about to flip. From the just-opened leather portfolio, Keisha Thompson took out a slim steel business card case. She slid one card out and placed it in front of Brad Mitchell. Embossed letters caught the chandelier light. Keisha Thompson, President and CEO, Thompson Financial Group. Brad smirked. Fake business cards go for $5 a stack. But David Parker didn't. He leaned in closer. The font, the cotton stock, the micro-embossing, all reminders of corporate-level briefing materials. Keisha drew out a second card, the First National Bank logo, beside fine print legalese reading, Board of Directors, Preferred Shareholder, Series A, Voting Rights. David's face visibly paled. He stammered, You're on the board?" Keisha's gaze was direct, her voice low but sharp. "I don't just sit on the board, Mr. Parker. Thompson Financial Group, TFG, holds 31% of First National Corporation, its single largest shareholder." The sound in the lobby seemed to vanish. Brad let the card slip from his hand. Susan Clark took half a step back, as if the counter had turned hot. On Maya Adams's screen, viewer count shot from 15,600 to 28,400 in 30 seconds. Comments exploded. "Plot twist! She owns the bank! This is history!" Jerome Brooks froze. Memories snapping back to internal bulletins and annual report photos. Yes, that face was hers. 40 minutes ago, he'd been forced to stand as a barrier. Now he was watching the balance of power flip. Keisha fully opened the portfolio. An acquisition agreement dated 8 months prior. The quarterly meeting agenda in bold. She nodded toward the sign reading, Executive Committee Meeting, 1:15 p.m. Today's executive meeting is the quarterly review with the controlling shareholder. The silence in the lobby shifted in texture, from courtroom to lecture hall, where the most expensive customer service mistake imaginable was now being broadcast live. Keisha's tone turned legal. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act, ECOA, allows fines up to $500,000 per violation. The Community Reinvestment Act, CRA, requires equal service to all communities. TFG's Compliance Division has standing orders to report any suspected bias immediately. She held up her phone, showing agency contacts. "Senator Elizabeth Warren's office is watching Maya's live stream. The House Financial Services Committee has been informed." Brad's mouth opened, then shut. He'd never imagined by-the-book lines could end up in front of senators and House committees. Susan slipped into damage control mode. "Perhaps we can speak privately." Keisha cut her off, eyes still locked on Maya's camera. "This stopped being internal 40 minutes ago, when you threatened to call federal authorities on a shareholder. The live stream has the entire exchange." The next strike, The market. Keisha opened a finance app. First National stock is down 4.2% after hours, roughly $340 million in market cap gone. Social sentiment on First National discrimination is at 89%. She swiped to a contact list: BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, $3 trillion asset managers are watching tonight's response as an ESG stress test. At the strategic level, it was a double vice: regulation squeezing from one side, money from the other. When the cost of bias spikes, sorry is no longer a cheap fix. Maya's lens caught David Parker gripping his radio. Code red. All conference room managers now. But the wave had already escaped the building. Major news homepages flashed breaking. First National's name had just become a nationwide crisis keyword. "We can fix this," David began. Keisha's expression didn't change. "I didn't come here to make a scene. I came to measure one thing: frontline institutional bias. And today, you've provided an excellent data set." She pulled out a packet labeled Customer Experience Assessment, Confidential Board Review. Brad tried a desperate save. "I was just following procedure. I wasn't discriminating." Keisha's reply cut like a blade. "Show me the procedure that permits racial profiling. Point me to the training manual section that instructs you to treat every black customer as a suspect." No one answered, because none existed. Maya read the rolling comments. "Lawyer here, sue under ECOA, CRA. Investor here, ESG sell-off incoming. Cut the exec bonuses." The online crowd was no longer just angry. They were prescribing remedies. Keisha looked up slowly, like delivering a verdict. "I'm issuing an ultimatum. 5 pillars of reform, 24-hour deadline. Accept, and we continue partnership. Refuse, and TFG divests immediately, with the other ESG funds following. Your opportunity cost will be incalculable." The lobby held its breath. Jerome straightened, his expression saying, "The right thing has finally found its voice." At the center of the frame, Keisha folded the portfolio smaller, placing 5 bullet point demands on the stone counter, ready to fire the next shot, precise and impossible to misinterpret. Before she spoke, the elevator dinged. Robert Sterling, the CEO of First National, rushed in, tie askew. His eyes took in the 2 business cards on the counter, then rose to meet Keisha, the controlling shareholder in the flesh. "Ms. Thompson, this does not reflect First National's values." Keisha didn't raise her voice. She simply flipped open the first page of an audit and set it down. 47 discrimination complaints in 6 months, 78% involving customers of color, 63% concentrated in branches with supervisory patterns identical to today's. Every formal escape route was now sealed. Robert Sterling was still swallowing hard when Keisha laid out the reform framework like chess pieces on a board. She spoke clearly, ticking off 5 fingers. Pillar 1. Immediate personal accountability. Terminate those directly responsible for and complicit in today's discrimination. Brad Mitchell, gross violation of conduct standards. Susan Clark, supervisor who enabled, and a special review of David Parker, regional manager who staged the investigation. Open a retroactive probe into past conduct at related branches. Estimated cost, $200,000, terminations plus legal. Condition, no reassignments disguised as internal transfers. Pillar 2, certified bias training. 40 hours of bias recognition training for all frontline staff with annual recertification. Modules to include federal law, ECOA CRA, de-escalation techniques, evidentiary standards, and peer oversight. Budget, $12 million within 60 days. KPI, 95% completion rate on time. Anonymous post-course evaluations. Pillar 3, Real-time AI bias monitoring. Develop a system to analyze language at counters, call centers, flagging discriminatory patterns, keywords, tone, disproportionate document demands. Alerts to supervisors within 60 seconds. Red flags trigger a transaction pause for review. Development cost, 45 knots. Annual maintenance, 8 MAB. Data architecture to ensure privacy compliance. Anonymization, audit logs. Pillar 4. Independent Civil Rights Ombudsman. Appoint a Civil Rights Ombudsman reporting directly to the board, with investigative authority, data access, power to recommend terminations, and mandate to correct processes. Budget, 5-year including investigative team. Complaint resolution SLA, 15 days, quarterly public report. Pillar 5, 25 Community Fund. Provide favorable loans to minority-owned businesses, expand financial education in underserved areas, and measure impact to ESG standards. This is not PR. It is responsible reinvestment. She closed her statement, placing her pen on the file like a final pin. Deadline, 24 hours. 8 a.m. tomorrow, the TFG board will convene to review your response. Accept, and capital remains stable. Refuse, and TFG will divest $1.2 billion, triggering follow-on ESG fund sell-offs estimated at $3.8 billion, followed by credit rating reviews and full executive scrutiny. David Parker started to say, "We'll need time," but the clock above had already flipped to 1:05 p.m. The PA announced, "Executive meeting in 10 minutes." Time was no longer a lifeline. It was the noose. Brad fell back on the stock line of the cornered. "I've got 2 kids, a mortgage. I was just following procedure." Keisha's gaze locked on him. Her words not harsh but sealing every exit. What procedure allows you to default to suspect status based on skin color? If it isn't in writing, then what you call procedure is just a bad habit in a uniform. Susan clung to, "We applied the same to everyone." Maya panned to the counter next door. Another large transaction completed in 3 minutes. The image shattered the slogan. Jerome lifted his head. "Miss Thompson, I'd like to apologize for my role." "I should have." Keisha gave a small shake of her head. "You were put in a bind. Your integrity today is noted." In that moment, a human being was handed back from the machine. Robert Sterling drew a deep breath. "First, National accepts responsibility, but we need a concrete plan." Keisha slid over a KPI chart. Training completion rate, 95% in 60 days. Post-course competency score, 4.55. AI monitoring, beta in 30 days at 25 high-risk branches. Full rollout in 120 days. False positive rate, 5% after 90 days. Ombudsman, BOD charter approval in 14 days. Quarterly public reports. Community fund, 30% dispersed in Q1 of rollout. 20% access increase in underserved regions. Discrimination complaints, 30% reduction after 6 months, measured by a third-party tool. Data transparency is the core, Keisha said. If it's not measured, it's not managed. If it's not public, no one will believe it. On the ticker screen, breaking news flashed. First National under fire for alleged discrimination. Shareholder confrontation live-streamed. The bank's PR team pinged Sterling's phone. Media demanding interviews. Statement needed in 30 minutes. He understood. Words alone wouldn't do. They needed measurable action. David cast a quiet, pleading glance. Susan gripped her bag straps until her knuckles whitened. Brad stood frozen, a faulty statue. In Maya's frame, the composition resembled a gallery photograph. Corporate bias in the digital age. At its center was Keisha, defining the terms without ever raising her voice. Code red, all managers to the conference room. David's voice rang, slightly off-key. But the order of power had flipped. The conference room was no longer where directives mattered. The teller counter was now where agreements would be signed. Keisha closed the portfolio, leaving only 2 business cards and the ultimatum. "I'll be back at 2:30 after my call with the Fed. By then, I expect a signed acceptance in full with a deployment schedule." Sterling nodded, a nod of pragmatic surrender. "We'll prepare immediately." This was no longer PR, it was a survival commitment. From a strategic lens, the key takeaways of the first 2 acts were now clear. Personal bias institutionalized through procedural language and staged transparency. Dual leverage, law plus market, had flipped the axis of power, turning apologies into KPI-bound, budgeted, deadline-driven reform. Digital public scrutiny, live streams, hashtags, media embeds had become society's immune system. When the collective gaze focuses, the cost of misconduct skyrockets. Keisha turned from the counter. Jerome held the door for her, a small gesture loaded with respect. Behind her, Brad, Susan, and David remained, 3 sediment layers of the system: frontline bias, supervisory enablement, managerial staging. Maya's lens followed Keisha's silhouette until the door closed, then panned to the sign, "Executive Committee Meeting." 1:15 p.m., like a comma before the next chapter. Next section, the emergency meeting, the signed acceptance of the Thompson standards, immediate personnel fallout, and how the ultimatum became an actionable implementation roadmap. The glass doors of the executive conference room shut at exactly 1:15 p.m. Inside, the long walnut table stretched like a runway. Robert Sterling stood at its head, both hands gripping the chair's edge as if to keep from sliding off a tilting earth. The wall screens were split into 3 feeds: Maya Adams's live stream, the after-hours stock price chart, and a scrolling aggregation of negative comments moving like a sandstorm. "Let's begin," Sterling said. Mark Ellis, general counsel, pushed his glasses up and launched the slide deck. ECOA, CRA, potential federal investigation, class action exposure. Recommendation: acknowledge, remediate immediately. Do not contest facts captured on video. CFO Linda Price followed. Cost comparison: Thompson Standards package estimated at $67 in year 1 versus 3.88B in lost capital, plus credit downgrade plus multi-year brand damage. The economic choice is obvious. Chief Risk Officer Janet Wade pointed to a chart. "We're in systemic risk territory. Legal, operational, market, and reputational vectors converging. Every minute of delay increases expected cost." HR head Olivia Reed opened a file. "I've reviewed disciplinary histories. Brad Mitchell. 34 complaints in 7 years. Pattern of adding extra documentation for customers of color, mostly dismissed as security caution." Susan Clark, multiple instances of nullifying staff bias reports, citing policy is policy. David Parker, staged public investigation. Rejected the guard's private room option. Sterling turned to David. "Your turn?" David tried to steady himself. "I misjudged. I thought transparency in front of customers was the standard. I turned it into public shaming." His words hit the table and stayed there. No one disagreed, no one rescued him. "Solution," Sterling said flatly. Mark counted off on his fingers. 1. Sign full written acceptance of the ultimatum. 2. Terminate Brad immediately. Suspend Susan. Recommend termination after expedited review. Ask David to resign to reduce friction. 3. Notify investors of the roadmap. 4. Emergency BOD meeting at 8 a.m. to approve budget and ombudsman charter. 5. Extend offer to Dr. Angela Davis, former DOJ attorney, to serve as civil rights ombudsman. 6. Promote Jerome Brooks to acting director of compliance and customer rights. His integrity is already on record. Linda, quick on the spreadsheet, added, I can release 40 immediately from reserves, plus reallocate CapEx this quarter. Remaining funds will shift from marketing to community fund and training. The CTO, dialed in by video, chimed, AI monitoring. We can fast-track RFP with 2 vendors, pilot in 25 hotspot branches within 30 days, integrate into CRM for real-time flagging. Sterling glanced at the clock. 1:32 p.m. The live stream? PR Chief Nina Cole answered, Media want interviews in 30 minutes. I advise no statement without concrete action. Plan. Open letter on website. Commit to KPI and timeline. Schedule 5 p.m. press conference after signing with TFG. Do it, Sterling ordered. The room shifted gears like an engine room changing speed. HR began printing Brad's termination letter and Susan's suspension draft. Mark typed the 5-pillar acceptance with Keisha's KPI table attached. Linda initialed budget reallocations. The CTO drafted a short-form RFP for AI. Nina built the Inclusion and Accountability Roadmap landing page. 1:50 p.m. Sterling looked at David. David nodded as if reading his sentence in advance. I'll submit my resignation after this meeting. No applause, but the air eased slightly. One obstruction chose to step aside. Cut to the hallway outside. Maya filmed the frosted glass doors, narrating for viewers. They're negotiating the fate of an entire bank. We'll verify it with documents, not slogans. Viewer count hit 36,000. Comments scrolled. Don't let them go dark, and demand a public timeline. 2:05 p.m. Keisha sat in the lounge, headset linked to the Fed call. Calm-voiced, she outlined her economic justice framework. When the cost of capital forces behavior change, reform moves faster than litigation. The voice on the line asked, Will TFG coordinate data for an industry-wide monitoring pilot? Keisha replied, We prioritize privacy, but we're willing to share aggregate metrics. 2:27 p.m. The conference room doors opened. Sterling and the legal team emerged, taut but composed. Mark handed Keisha a stack of papers. First National accepts all 5 pillars with KPI and budget attached. BOD approval 8 a.m. tomorrow. Today, we're starting any items not requiring a vote. Keisha flipped through with the ease of someone used to thick briefs. The final page listed deadlines. AI beta in 30 days, full rollout in 120, Ombudsman charter in 14 days, 40-hour training, 95% completion in 60 days, 30% complaint reduction in 6 months, $25 community fund, 30% dispersed in Q1. She nodded. Add quarterly public reports, third-party KPI validation, mandatory transaction halt on Level 1 AI flags, update and sign. Mark amended immediately and reprinted. Sterling signed. Keisha signed, received and noted. The hum of the printer became the drumbeat of the modern era. Action first, words later. From an analytical view, this was the phase shift moment. From apology to reform contract. Crisis management art here lay not in polished statements but in metrics, timelines, independent authority, and stopgap enforcement. Process, once weaponized, was being rebuilt as a customer protection system. 2:40 p.m. Olivia got word Brad had been escorted out, his access card disabled. Susan was suspended pending expedited investigation, with a corporate-level violation warning. David sent his resignation email CC'd to the entire exec tier. Nina pushed the Inclusion and Accountability page live with commitments and KPI. No fluff, just the work to be done. On Maya's screen, a banner popped. First National commits to Thompson standards. Comment, don't believe until you see the budget. Linda, CFO, posted the breakdown immediately. $67 year one spend, itemized. 2:55 p.m. Keisha closed the portfolio. 5 p.m. press conference. Don't speak. Project the signed agreement, the budget, the timeline, and the responsible parties. And have Jerome Brooks at your side, with Maya on the transparency Q&A. The public needs to see who's been empowered. Sterling nodded. This time agreement, not surrender. As Keisha left, Jerome waited at the door. He whispered, "Thank you for naming what I've seen but couldn't say." Keisha smiled. "Starting tomorrow, your job is to help others speak before things escalate, and you'll have the authority to make it stick." The marble lobby resumed its murmur of footsteps and low voices. But the building's power structure had shifted. By 5:00 p.m., when the press lights went white-hot, the world would not hear an apology. It would see a blueprint. 8 a.m. The next morning, the First National Board of Directors convened in an emergency session. Robert Sterling's hand trembled only slightly as he opened. "We accept the Thompson standards in full." There was no debate. The vote unanimous. The gavel struck once, like driving a stake into fresh ground. Olivia, HR, reported first. Brad Mitchell. Terminated effective immediately, with his violation file forwarded to the Ombudsman for pattern review. Susan Clark. Contract terminated for negligent supervision and enabling bias. David Parker. Resigned. File sent to the Ombudsman for cross-branch scrutiny. The room stayed silent. Personal accountability now had names, dates, and signatures. Nina, PR, shared the results of the 5 p.m. press conference. Initial response: cautiously positive. Because we showed documents, budgets, timelines, KPIs. The press is calling it verified action, not an apology. Linda, CFO, added, "Stock has rebounded, closing above yesterday's high. ESG funds signal they'll hold positions. Some may increase weight if we hit our 90-day marks." The CTO presented. AI monitoring. Framework agreements signed with 2 vendors. Beta at 25 high-risk branches in 4 states. Integration with call audio and teller cameras. Audio anonymized per law. Real-time alert dashboard with 3 tiers. Tier 1, halt transaction and call supervisor. Tier 2, add ombudsman. Tier 3, close case and investigate within 24 hours. The door opened. Keisha Thompson stepped in and took the chair, as was her right as controlling shareholder. "Let's start with people," she said. "On the front line, who represents these new values?" Olivia smiled. "Jerome Brooks." The back door opened. Jerome, yesterday a security guard, today wearing a new badge. Director of Compliance and Customer Advocacy. A few claps, then more, swelling into a round of applause. Maya Adams, seated in the back row, filmed the moment, symbol of power placed where it belongs. Sterling introduced Maya. As of today, Maya joins as Director of Transparency Communications, External. Her role: publish quarterly KPI progress, maintain a hotline for customer experience reports, coordinate with the Ombudsman. Maya nodded, smiling with both joy and gravity. Transparency isn't to look good. It's to keep control. Mark, legal, moved to the Ombudsman framework. We've reached Dr. Angela Davis, former DOJ. She's accepted. Ombudsman Charter reports directly to the board, full data access, authority to recommend terminations and policy changes, 15-day SLA per complaint, quarterly public bulletins, whistleblower protections. The board voted unanimous approval. Linda, CFO, displayed the 67 year one budget clearly allocated. 12 Lydium hours, 40-hour training, plus LMS infrastructure, third-party evaluations, 45 years, AI monitoring, development plus integration, 8 amp year maintenance, 5-year, Ombudsman and Investigative Team, 25-meter Community Fund, ring-fenced from OPEX. Contingency and Transparency Communications. Keisha tapped her pen lightly. 90-day KPIs? Janet, Risk, replied, Training completion, 70%, AVG score, 4.2/5, AI alerts operational at 25 branches with 10% false positives, Ombudsman fully chartered, Q1 public bulletin issued, 15% bias complaint reduction versus 6-month baseline. 1 to 80-day KPIs, 95% training completion, 30% complaint reduction, 5% false positives, 30% community fund disbursed, 3 public case studies of successful remediation. The meeting shifted to deployment details. In Tulsa, a teller logged into the unconscious bias e-learning module. In Boston, a supervisor edited forms to remove unnecessary purpose of withdrawal fields. In Atlanta, engineers were wiring APIs to capture real-time language data for the AI. Maya trained her camera on these micro-movements, not promises but proof. On day 3, the dashboard triggered a Tier 1 alert at one branch. A teller used the phrase unusually large amount for, with a brown-skinned customer withdrawing funds. The supervisor stepped in, reassigned the transaction, apologized, and completed it in 4 minutes. The ombudsman logged the incident, turning a minor misstep into a lesson for the entire network. The first signal, the meter was running. In parallel, the 25 million Community Fund opened applications for minority-owned businesses, preferential loan rates, free financial advisory, credit education workshops in underserved areas. Maya interviewed an auto shop owner in Detroit. I'd been denied 3 times for weak file. Today, they walked me through building a cash flow plan. First time I've seen the door open. Regulators sent a letter. Positive acknowledgement of rapid response. The House Financial Services Committee invited Keisha to testify on the economic justice model. FDIC OCC Fed proposed using First National's KPIs as an industry benchmark. On the market, FNC stock not only recovered, but ticked upward, as investors repriced for lower governance risk and improved ESG standing. From the analytical tier, the Thomson standards had moved from ultimatum, contract, execution. Its 3 enduring pillars, quantification and deadlines, KPI, timelines, public disclosure, countering the empty apology, independent authority, ombudsman, AI-triggered transaction halts, countering process capture, resource reallocation, budget, community fund, countering PR-washed ethics. Closing the session, Sterling looked around, speaking slowly. Yesterday, we learned an expensive lesson. Today, we pay in full, through action. He turned to Keisha. Thank you for forcing us to grow up. Keisha replied, This isn't a lecture, it's architecture. So your customers never have to live stream to be treated with respect again. As people rose, Jerome paused at the doorway, glancing toward the marble lobby where it had all begun. He adjusted his new name badge and let out a long breath. Out there, the teller counters were unchanged, the marble still shone. But within those veins, new wiring now ran: measurement, accountability, respect. And most important, the door stood ready for the next person to walk in, carrying their dignity. 7:58 a.m., Houston branch, Monday morning. At teller station number 3, the login screen had barely come up when the dashboard popped a gray bubble. AI monitoring. Ready? Latency 100 minutos. Young teller Aidan Ross took a deep breath. He had just finished his 40 hours of training last week. Unconscious bias, de-escalation, eco-AA Cray compliance. But e-learning is one thing, facing a live customer is another. 8:06 a.m. A Mexican-American woman stepped up, placing a withdrawal slip for $18,000 on the counter. Aiden smiled, starting with the standard opener. How can I help you today? Everything was smooth until he slipped. That's a pretty large amount for a customer with this type of account. He didn't even finish before a yellow light blinked in the corner of his screen. Level 1, flag. Language pattern, comparative framing, plus this type of account, risk of bias. Pause and call supervisor. The mandatory 60-second pause countdown began. Supervisor Mary Coleman rushed over. I'll take it from here, ma'am. We apologize for the wording. I'll process this withdrawal right away. If you'd like, I can prepare fresh hundreds for you. The transaction was completed in 4 minutes. The dashboard marked it resolved, sending the anonymized audio clip to the Ombudsman's office. 9:20 a.m. Remote Operations Room. Jerome Brooks studied the heat map of the 25 pilot branches. Houston's yellow flag turned green, annotated, supervisor intervention plus apology plus completion. Coaching note sent. Dr. Chai Angela Davis opened a ticket. No discipline. Schedule 1.1 follow-up training for Aiden. Add replacement script. I'll process your withdrawal right away. If you have a preferred denomination, I can prepare it. 10:30 a.m. Dallas Training Room. Olivia Reed, HR, stood before a class of new hires. Yesterday, 3 Level 1 flags, 0 Level 2. All 3 closed with a proper apology plus transaction completed in under 5 minutes. That's a win. Maya Adams set her camera on the side, filming an internal video. A day with the justice meter. She did a quick interview with Aiden. How did you feel when the flag went off? Aiden exhaled. Honestly, panicked. But it saved me from saying something worse. That afternoon in New Jersey, a senior teller pushed back. I feel like I'm being watched. Jerome answered calmly over Zoom. This tool protects both the customer and you. When there's a flag, the pause prevents you from getting sued over one stray remark. We're diffusing minds, not planting them. He shared the 90-day numbers. Training, 72% completed. ABD score, 4.35. AI, 25 pilot branches. False positive rate, 9.4%. On target, house 10%. Bias complaints, down 17% from 6-month baseline. Customer NPS at pilot locations, plus 11 points. The Ombudsman's Q1 bulletin went live on the Inclusion and Accountability page. 12 Level 1 incidents, 2 Level 2, Ombudsman involved, 0 Level 3. 3 policy changes implemented. Removal of purpose of withdrawal from standard forms, standardized apology script, frontline authority to pause for bias granted to all. The 25 Madler Community Fund launched Round 1, 8.2 near disbursed. In Detroit, Marcus Green's auto shop received a $150,000 low-interest loan plus cash flow planning support. He hired 4 more mechanics. In Oakland, a black women-founded food co-op received $400,000. Its credit education program drew 120 local residents. Maya produced a 5-minute segment letting recipients tell their stories. No corporate gloss. Pushback came too. An anonymous email complained, "The AI is eavesdropping." Mark Ellis, legal, and the CTO issued a public reply. Audio is anonymized, stored with audit chain controls, used only for pattern analysis. No personal content beyond the transaction scope is processed. Fully compliant with state and federal law. Dr. Sirka Davis added, "We have an independent data ethics committee. Quarterly investor call." Linda Price, CFO, reported, "Deployment costs on budget, ESG funds holding. Some will increase weight if next 90-day KPIs are met." A fund manager asked, "What if false positives don't drop to 5% by 180 days?" Linda, "We have a tuning roadmap, regional phrase dictionaries, adaptive thresholds, so it doesn't overburden the front line." Evening, a small conference room. Sterling looked at the board. "The plan is working, but don't get complacent." Keisha nodded. The metric isn't how many slides we show. It's how many times Maya's camera doesn't need to turn on. The room felt quiet, the weight of that line heavier than any chart. From the analytical tier, the 90-day run proved 3 things. AI doesn't replace humanity. It stops people from sliding into bad habits by pausing and calling in backup at the right moment. Transparency is the immune system. Quarterly bulletins, public KPIs, data feedback loops. Aligned incentives make change stick. The tool reduces legal exposure for staff, cuts friction for customers, and stabilizes capital for investors. When Maya's "A Day with the Justice Meter" video went live, the top comment wasn't praise for the bank. It was a simple line. "Today, I withdrew money in 3 minutes." No one asked why. That was the metric Keisha wanted to see. Ordinary silence replacing abnormal noise. Washington, D.C., 10:00 a.m. The House Financial Services Committee opened its hearing on economic justice in financial services. Keisha Thompson sat at the center of the witness table, Jerome Brooks to her left, Dr. Angela Davis to her right. Cameras, microphones, bright lights. No one here was looking for an apology. They were looking for mechanisms. Keisha began. 3 levers: law, capital, data. When the cost of bias is high enough, behavior changes quickly. But for change to be legal, ethical, and effective, we need transparent metrics, independent authority for the ombudsman, and the power to pause transactions when there's suspicion. She read out the 6-month numbers. Training: 96% of frontline staff completed. Average score, 4.65. AI, full system rollout. False positive rate, 4.8%, target, and 5%. Bias complaints, down 33% from baseline. Company-wide NPS, plus 18 points in historically high complaint regions. Community fund, 9.1 disbursed, 36% of annual plan. On-time repayment rate at 98%. Jerome described a case study. Phoenix branch. Teller used the phrase, "for accounts like yours." Level 2 flag triggered because the customer had previously reported discrimination. We paused the transaction, switched to a supervisor, apologized, and processed it immediately. Ombudsman followed up within 24 hours. Customer rated the experience 5.5 and sent a thank you email. He concluded, "The right to pause for bias doesn't slow the bank. It saves time by skipping the argument loop." A representative asked, "Could AI amplify bias if the data is bad?" Dr. Davis replied, "We don't use AI to judge people, only to flag risky language." The data set is intentionally designed. It doesn't learn from past complaints as true, shuck false labels. It only learns sentence patterns flagged by attorneys and linguists. Our Data Ethics Committee audits quarterly and publishes the error rates. Boston that afternoon. Harvard Business School hosted a case study. Thompson Standards When Markets Punish Bias. Keisha told students, "I don't want anyone to lose their job. I want a system where bad behavior is no longer cheap." One student asked, "Can other banks copy this without being genuine?" Keisha, "Demand KPIs and independent reporting. The media will take care of the rest." Wall Street Evening. Linda Price took investor Q&A. "We've hit our 180-day KPIs. Major ESG funds have sent letters committing to hold. 2 funds have increased their positions slightly. Ratings agencies have noted governance improvement." A fund manager asked, "What if next year, when the spotlight fades, things go back to the old way?" Linda, "KPIs are tied to executive bonuses. The ombudsman reports directly to the board. Quarterly bulletins are public. Backsliding will cost more than moving forward." Late that night, in a small meeting room, Brad Mitchell sat before the e-learning screen of a credit union that had just hired him, on the condition he complete bias reduction training. The video opened with Maya Adams lecturing on harmful language. Brad froze on a frame of Jerome Brooks at the hearing. He swallowed. After the course, he would speak at a community college about the cost of a smirk. Ombudsman's office. Dr. Davis and her team reviewed a new form, removing the monthly income field from withdrawal transactions, irrelevant, and adding a preferred form of address field, sir, ma'am, other, to cut misaddress errors. The first complex case closed with a reprimand for a supervisor who ignored AI flags 3 times. The notice was published anonymously in the quarterly bulletin, not to shame, but to teach. Maya filmed behind-the-scenes footage for Owning Justice, a documentary in the making. She didn't shoot tears, she shot whiteboards with KPIs, customer thank you emails after interventions, dashboards shifting from red to green in 60 seconds. Her voiceover. Justice isn't always loud, sometimes it's a pause. Brussels. Virtual meeting with the EU. A commissioner asked Keisha, "Can this model apply in countries with strict data privacy?" Keisha, "We don't store voice tied to identity. We store risk scores and action logs. Countries can set their own thresholds as long as they keep the pause authority and ombudsman independence." They nodded, requesting a technical guidance document. Inside, First National. Olivia showed the training map. 342 branches, 96% complete. The remaining 4% on long leave or newly hired. "We've turned cultural expectations into job requirements," she said. Janet, Risk, added, "Complaint rates at the 10 former hotspot branches are now at system average." From the analytical tier, the 6-month mark locked the change loop. Institutional design, independent ombudsman, pause flags, public KPIs, outweighed moral messaging. The narrative shifted from generic inspiration to operational mechanics, from apology scripts to language detection APIs. Market incentives rewarded right behavior and made wrong behavior expensive, making returning to old ways economically irrational. At night, Keisha left headquarters. She stopped in the marble lobby, where it all began. Light reflected, footsteps distant. She didn't smile in triumph. She did a head count. A system that paused in time, 1 staff retrained, 1 customer who didn't need to live stream. Tomorrow, she would fly to Boston to speak to students. Next week, Congress would invite her as an unpaid advisor on an industry guidance bill. Next month, the Regional Bank Alliance would request a license to reference the Thompson Standards. At the end of the hall, Jerome waited for the elevator, holding a stack of files. He looked up. 6 months. Keisha nodded. And the best thing we did today was have nothing worth live streaming. The doors closed, leaving room for the next year, when this story would leave one bank and enter an entire industry. The test ahead would be harder, but the water had found its channel. Global Banking Equality Summit, New York, 10 to YAM. The hall was packed. Backdrop bearing 3 clean words: law, capital, data. Keisha Thompson stepped to the podium, no flourish. Just an opening line. Dignity is non-negotiable. On the screen, 4 first-year metrics appeared. Discrimination complaints at institutions adopting the Thompson Standards. 52%, minority business lending, industry-wide, adopting group, plus 34%, frontline training completion rate, 97%, AVG score, 4.65, AI monitoring, 4.7% false positives, median intervention time. 63 seconds federal agencies, Fed FDIC OCC, had issued guidance recommending the independent ombudsman model, plus pause for bias authority as a best practice. Several states were moving to require public KPI disclosure in licensing rules. First National, FNC, had not only recovered but hit a new share price high after a year of implementation. Governance risk reports noted structural transformation. On the discussion panel, a regional bank CEO asked, "Year 1 cost of 67 item. How can small banks afford it?" Linda Price, FNC CFO, answered plainly, "We're opening a shared service option. AI as a service, licensed training, alliance ombudsman. Economies of scale make per unit cost viable for smaller banks." Dr. Highspack Angela Davis added, "The core points aren't expensive. Pause authority plus quarterly bulletin plus independent investigation." One delegate pressed, "Could the AI be biased?" Jerome Brooks presented the audit. Training data never used past complaints as true, false labels. Only risky phrasing patterns tagged by attorneys and linguists. Quarterly audits by an independent data ethics committee. Intervention logs published anonymously in the Ombudsman's Bulletin. In the lobby, the Thompson Financial Group Equality Fund booth displayed 127 disbursed over 12 months, creating 8,400 jobs. Marcus Green, Detroit, manned a small table, a photo of his expanded auto shop, 3 apprentices grinning with safety certificates. "They didn't just give me cheap money," Marcus told a reporter. "They taught me how to read cash flow." Cannes Film Festival the week before. Maya Adams's documentary, Owning Justice, A Banking Revolution, won the Palme d'Or for documentaries. Maya herself was almost absent from the film. Instead, viewers saw dashboards changing color, standardized apology scripts, customer thank you emails. When her film's name was called, she simply said, "A phone can start it, but a new institution has to finish it." Brad Mitchell sat in a community college classroom in Cleveland, explaining how costly one smirk had been. In his new job at a credit union, he took part in the My Mistake, Our Lesson program. Not to whitewash, but to put the cost on the board. A lost job, a lasting memory, and trust rebuilt customer by customer. In hospitality, a 12-brand hotel chain signed an MOU to adopt a stop bias trigger. When staff use a stereotype framed phrase, the system pings the shift manager to swap in a new handler. A nonprofit hospital in Minneapolis piloted Pause for Bias at patient intake. The AI didn't log illness or ethnicity. It only flagged phrases like, "with your insurance." 6 months in, intake times down, complaints down sharply. Brussels, EU webinar. A commissioner asked, "Would GDPR allow this?" Keisha laid out the architecture. Risk scores not tied to identity. Anonymized audio, minimal audit chain storage, region-specific thresholds. What's non-negotiable, she stressed, is the Ombudsman's independence and the quarterly public reporting obligation. Inside FNC, there was one slip. A branch supervisor ignored AI flags 3 times in a busy week. Level 3 trigger fired. Ombudsman intervened. Result: anonymized public reprimand in the quarterly bulletin and mandatory full-shift retraining. No scandal, just breaks applied in time. That was success, killing a crisis in process. End of day, open Q&A. An economics student asked, "What stops the model from sliding back once public pressure cools?" Keisha, a closed loop, public KPIs tied to exec bonuses, investor oversight, ombudsman with teeth. When backsliding is more expensive than moving forward, progress is the path of least resistance. From the analytical tier, Year 1 delivered 3 durable outcomes. Standardized pause for bias as an operational skill, not personal sensitivity. Migrated the model cross-sector. Banking, hospitality, healthcare. Market forces, was soft regulation, guidance, interlocked. Law set the boundary, capital set the price, Data set the pace. Evening. Keisha stood at the hotel lobby's glass doors, looking down at the avenue. A message from Jerome popped up. Tomorrow I'm speaking in Detroit to a group of new tellers. I'll tell the 60-second pause as a shield. Keisha replied, add the ending. No one should have to live stream to be respected. First National's marble lobby, Friday noon. The stone still gleamed. The lights still glowed warm. At counter number 2, a black teenager in a school uniform stood beside his mother. I need to withdraw $200 from my summer savings account, he said, a little nervous. The teller smiled. Of course. How would you like the bills? His hands loosened. No camera phones came up. That was the metric. Above, a small screen flashed a green flag. No risk pattern detected. Jerome Brooks, on a surprise walkthrough today, watched from a distance, noting, correct script, good pace, no unnecessary document requests. He left the lobby feeling as though a circle had closed. 12th floor boardroom. Robert Sterling delivered the Year 1 summary to the board and fund representatives. A short slide deck, KPIs met, not met, lessons, choke points. We've cut internal complaints by 33%. Industry Alliance reports 52% were adopted. False positives down to 4.7%. Community fund disbursed 36%, repayment rate 98%. Challenges remain. Some supervisors still uneasy with the pause, a few branches tight on staffing at peak hours. He closed. But the memory cost of day 1 has become everyday architecture. Maya Adams sat at the end of the table, camera off this time. She opened her notebook, a list of stories she didn't have to film. Somali man in Minneapolis withdrew car repair money in 5 minutes. Cuban grandmother in Tampa opened a CD without being asked her son's income. Short lines, light as haiku, with the pulse of change. Keisha presented a single page. Diffusion map. A Midwest regional bank had just requested a license for the Thompson Standards. Training, AI, Alliance Ombudsman, public KPIs. The Hotel Alliance signed a charter to put pause for bias into their operations manual. The Hospital Association was piloting greeting protocols and language flags. This isn't a brand, Keisha said. It's a protocol. Mark Ellis, legal, updated. House Financial Services Committee is drafting guidance drawn from our KPIs. California is considering requiring ombudsman bulletins for banks over $10 billion in assets. Signals are aligned. Linda, CFO, added, we've tied executive bonuses to long-term KPIs. If we fall below threshold, bonuses cut by 30-50%, incentive to stay the course. In one corner, the Ombudsman's Q4 bulletin sat ready for print. 8 Level 1 flags, 1 Level 2, 0 Level 3, 2 policy changes. Removed source of funds field for routine withdrawals. Added alternate scripts for the Midwest region. The bulletin also recorded a serious reprimand for a manager who intentionally ignored a flag. Standardized as a lesson, not public shaming. Afternoon, graduation ceremony for new tellers in Detroit. Jerome spoke. You wear the bank's logo on your shirt. In your hand, you hold the pause button. Use it as a promise. The applause wasn't loud, but it was steady. Down below, Aiden Ross, Houston, texted his trainer. That flag the other day saved me from a bad slip. Thanks for those 60 seconds. Late evening, Maya stopped by her studio, looked at the Owning Justice poster on the wall. In the corner, small type read, a smartphone can start it. An institution must finish it. She opened an offer to teach part-time at a journalism school. Course title, Transparency with Architecture. She sketched a syllabus line, tell less, publish more data. Brad Mitchell wrapped up a talk at a community college. A student asked, Would you hate the AI for catching you if you were still at your old bank? Brad sighed. I wish I'd had a pause button that day. It might have saved me from my own habits. No excuses, no drama. Just a plain slice of truth. Epilogue in the marble lobby. A middle-aged customer walked in, glanced around, murmured to his wife, "Feels normal." From the corner of a security camera, normal was the destination. No crowd, no blaring PA, no reporters. A process once used as a weapon had become a safety rail. Transparency, once a flashlight, had become ambient light. From the analytical tier, 10 parts of the story condensed into 5 working principles. Institutional bias often hides under the name procedure. The fix is to re-architect procedure with pause points, independent authority, and public metrics. Economic justice doesn't replace legal justice. It accelerates it by making bad behavior expensive. AI works best as a warning bell, not a judge. KPIs plus executive bonuses turn ethics into contractual obligations. The most meaningful story is the one that doesn't happen. The next person doesn't need to live stream. As Keisha left the building for home, her phone buzzed. A text from a hotel chain CEO. "We've finalized the license. Monday, the pause button goes live." Keisha replied with 3 words. Verify, publish, repeat. Then she put the phone away, looking out at the evening street. Somewhere, a customer would step into another lobby, hand over a card, say something ordinary, and the ordinary would continue. No camera, no social media storm. The story began with a verbal blade in a marble hall. It ended with a pause. That was enough. It was the journey from one moment of public humiliation to an industry-wide reform, where procedure was no longer an excuse for prejudice, but a tool to protect every customer's dignity. And you? Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination at a bank or in a public space? And how would you want those institutions to change? Share your story in the comments so we can discuss it together. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, share so more people can see it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories on justice, dignity, and the power of community change.